I mean, beyond like the kind of ability to choose your location, what are your guys' experience in terms of like actually finding a job in the academia market after graduating a PhD? Like, is it? I'm just I'm totally clueless, but like, is it guaranteed that if you do a PhD and get a good mark, you'll find a position somewhere, or is there likelihood that you go through all of this process, you do your PhD, and then you're basically in standstill, waiting for a position to waiting for an opportunity to open up for maybe 2, 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Was it 1990s? The average PhD student's age in Denmark was 42, because you're just basically waiting for your professors to retire so you can actually yeah, exactly. You have to take over that position. I don't think that situation is not that bad, but I think my projection is that it's like, if you just stay within Western Hemisphere and I just want to work only in Western Europe, the number would be very difficult to find a job.
do you mean in terms of location or in terms of field of philosophy?
Field of philosophy. And if you said that I'm not going to work anywhere outside of the Western Europe,
Mm-hmm.
I think that your chances of finding a job, it would be very slim. I think it's very difficult to find stable position. Like, I think almost exclusively the people who actually find a position are willing to just go beyond any boundaries and just whatever means necessary to stay, have a contract in academic contact.
Is that because of the lack of demand, or because the number of people who are doing are trying to get that position?
I would describe it as oversupply.
Oversupply.
Okay. Yeah.
If you look at the number of students studying philosophy throughout the world over the past several decades, it's grown slowly but steadily, right? So again, going back to the point that, most of us kind of earn our keep by being educators, how many jobs there are in the field closely correlates, right, with sort of how many students are there out there, and are they studying philosophy? But one of the things that's happened, I would say, throughout academia since kind of tracing back to like the 1950s and 60s is that there are more and more PhD programs, more and more countries that are trying to make themselves prominent in the academic world by having PhD programs. So the number of PhDs competing for the positions that are out there has gone up and up and up. So to put it in context, the job that I had in California, which I got in 2003, received 375 applicants. Right. And I take that not to be all that unusual, getting hundreds and hundreds of applicants, all of whom are probably at least minimally qualified for the job, and many of them far more than minimally qualified. I have never heard, right, during my 20-odd year career in academia, any colleague ever say to me, yeah, we ran a job search and nobody who applied was any good. Right. What they really say is, man, there's all these, incredibly talented, well-qualified, energetic people, and we have to choose just one, among, this, smorgasbord of wonderful applicants. And the reality is, that there are a lot of PhD programs in philosophy where only a minority of the students end up with permanent employment in philosophy. I do think one of the things that you need to be thinking about, for better or for worse, is sort of the prestige hierarchy that exists within our field. It's just true that if you get a job at, I'm just going to pick one institution among several that I might select, Princeton, that you will probably get a pretty good job somewhere in the academic world. Not necessarily, but it'd be surprising if you don't. On the other hand, and this is not to pick on any particular institution, if you were to get a PhD from, I don't know, the University of Washington or the University of Manchester here in the UK, these are places that have excellent scholars and so forth, but it's just the reality that you're going to struggle because, you're just not associated with an institution that has the same level of visibility and prestige. So, I don't like the fact that there is this sort of reality in our field, but it would be a disservice, right, for me to tell a student, just ignore that, right? Because, you'd be doing something very, very foolish if you didn't notice that, for example, having a degree from Oxford, say, tends to go a lot further in terms of enhancing your career prospects than, one from, I don't know, Cornell or, University of Illinois. Again, not to disparage those institutions. That's not the point. But
yeah, descriptively, like
just
that's
just the reality.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean,
tough message.
Yeah, it really is. So like I struggle with this conflict, right? That if you're interested in a master's degree or PhD, like I always said, go with the supervisor. If you want to study with Michael Cholbi, go to Edinburgh, right?
Well,
but
right,
yeah, if you really want to study the grief and philosophy of death and dying, that's the guy you need to go, right? And then you work with the professors that are actually hands-on and actually have a conversation with you at the equal level. But if you're interested in getting a job, go to Oxford, Cambridge, right? Because it has a higher chance of getting the job opportunity. So like there's a practicality of like the basic rule that when you apply, right? I started from Nebraska and ended up in the KU Leuven, right? So you just always have to go up the ladder. You always apply for the program that is ranked higher so that you increase the chance of getting the job, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a job, right? So at some point you have to make a decision. So do I want to become academic, playing all these games perfectly to actually survive in academia, or like, you know what, at some point I just have to draw the line and say, I need to study with one of the best of the best, even though that person doesn't work for the institution that is ranked as one of the best universities. So this example is not working well, but you understand that if you're interested in Italian philosophy, right, you're not going to find in Oxford or Cambridge. You have to go somewhere else, right? So it has to come down to your interest and desire to philosophize. Right?
But it should be said that people get permanent academic posts coming from lots and lots of different PhD programs. It's not that any program has a monopoly on them or anything. I think it's interesting to notice here at Edinburgh the sheer range of different places that people got their PhDs from. It's quite remarkable to notice all the different places that people attended. But a realistic perspective, has to include that, yes, these things go a long way in determining what kinds of options are available to you. And, kind of bottom line, lots of students get PhDs in philosophy and don't get permanent academic jobs. And so if that's kind of where your heart's desire is, you do have to ask yourself the sort of, alarming or perhaps unsettling question, am I willing to put in, say, 6 years of labor, including all the opportunity costs that might involve, and end up being, 29, 30 years old or something like that, and kind of facing a professional dead end, right? Where you kind of have to then figure out, well, how am I going to, support myself? What's my livelihood going to be if it's not going to be in the academic world? And I think that, you never want to sort of paint the worst case scenario for people, but I do think that students need to be cognizant of that possibility because it's not like an abstract possibility. It happens to
many of us,
a non-trivial number of people, right, who pursue PhDs.
Can I just ask like a very specific question when you were talking about, the prestige and how kind of the reality is very much like your chances of getting a job from Oxford is way higher than like, I don't know, Manchester. I'll just use your example. In terms of like name brand versus prestige within philosophy, like I know there's kind of this philosophy gourmet rankings of, and they're very specific by philosophical area. I think University of Pittsburgh is one that I've seen that's like ranked very high, but it doesn't have that same name brand as like Oxford or Princeton to people who are outside of the like philosophy academia world. I'm wondering, let's say just hypothetically somebody gets in to like University of Pittsburgh, and University of Pittsburgh is ranked technically the highest on these rankings in the area of philosophy they want, but they also get into, let's say, like Harvard, and maybe Harvard's like 5th in the rankings, but it's got that name. Should you care more about, in terms of the prospects of getting a job, should you care more about the name or like the actual way that the program is regarded in terms of like quote unquote rankings?
It's a really good question.
Well, I think the ultimate answer to that depends on what kind of positions you're hoping to get. So Pittsburgh is a good example. NYU is another. Those are programs that are extremely well regarded within philosophy, but maybe kind of within the overall sort of academic branding universe don't stand on the same par with Harvard or something like that. So I think what evidence I've seen about this suggests that if you are thinking that you want a job in a PhD granting program, right, that's very sort of research intensive, then I would say that you should opt for, given in your example, say, Pittsburgh over Harvard. If, on the other hand, you're sort of thinking, I'm open to lots and lots of different kinds of positions, some of which might be more teaching focused, for example, if you're in the United States, then I would say probably you should opt for Harvard. And the reason for this is that, the people who make the decisions about who gets which jobs, yes, they're the relevant faculty at those institutions, but they're also administrators, right? And administrators are often perhaps more impressed, right? Because they're not just as up to date or in the know about what's going on in all these different academic disciplines. They're likely to be a little bit more impressed by saying, well, we hired such and such from Harvard, then we hired such and such from Pittsburgh, even though the philosopher might sort of say, well, we like Pittsburgh a little better, maybe, right? So I think it kind of depends on the positions that you're looking for. But again, certainly within philosophy, there are places that relative to their place within kind of the overall academic universe, punch well above their weight. Pittsburgh and NYU and these other kinds of places, and they certainly you certainly shouldn't rule those places out, right? Simply by virtue of the fact that they may not be quite as impressive to a dean or to somebody who's outside of our profession.
I do think that general rules that these kind of rankings play a role when there's two candidates is almost identical, right? And then it just feels like the trust goes to the higher brand, right? But the difficulty of going the graduate programs that are actually not ranked high is that you have to really show twice as much. That you have to be able to show that you can pitch twice as much as the other guy that went to one of the top league, right? So when you enter the arena, I think there is a tendency to expect that, if you didn't go to the top institutions in that area, you have to show us something that wow us, right?
Yeah.
But if you play average, it's very difficult for you to get a job. So that's why I think sometimes it's better to actually go high-ranked university and train yourself there, even if that's not the best place to actually study the topic. So generally, always go up the rank when you apply for the graduate program, and hopefully you can find some professors from that institutions that are interested in the same area as you. So that's the general advice you give. But if you find one celebrity thinker, the grief, right? Michael Cholbi is on grief. This is the one guy working on this topic in this entire zip code or vicinity of this nation. Just go. I don't care about the ranking. Just learn from that person. And so I tell my students that, hey, you might not be able to actually get a job right after this PhD, but if you follow this program, you'll be one of the few people that can actually work in this area of Japanese philosophy. So you will be established as leading scholar of Japanese philosophy. Whether or not academia can provide you positions to actually feed your family is a whole other set of question, right?
Yeah, I think what I observe is that sort of the more prestigious or more better known a program is, sort of the more candidates are given the benefit of the doubt, right? So
that's
the way to look at it is, the candidate from Oxford, since they were admitted to Oxford, it's presumed that they have philosophical talent, and even if, say, as a PhD student, they didn't publish any articles, it's assumed that they will, right? They just haven't gotten there yet or something like that. So the benefit of the doubt is extended to them. Whereas if you went to the less prestigious program, you have to have more kind of concrete evidence and accomplishments, right? You have to be able to say, look at what I can do, right? Kind of counteract the sense that, the people from the more prestigious programs, if they don't have that concrete evidence, it's just because it hasn't sort of materialized yet.
And oftentimes it's quite accurate. It's not complete prejudice. Is that if you go to Harvard and Oxford, send us applications and look at the dossier, and they publish a few articles, and when you read their work, it's pretty decent. So it's very, very difficult to, you know, like
Harvard graduates, not terrible.
Yeah, it's just not
controversial.
Yeah. It's very difficult to find I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but it's very difficult to find exceptions, and I think that's what the good recruitment process that university is actually enforcing. You know, so I do. You know, there should be always a benefit of doubt, and it should measure each individual applicants based on their personal achievement. But if you went to Harvard, like they would give you a lot of like support to make sure that you stay on top, right? Yeah. So that's why I would recommend to just always think about higher ranked university in the area that you're interested in to go there.